Hello, happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining me here tonight. My name is Alyssa Thomas from Penguin and Fish, where we make lovely and quirky hand embroidery kits. And I'm here every weeknight at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. That's 9:30 Eastern and 6:30 Pacific. And it's a time where we can relax and craft together for about an hour. And I work on projects from beginning to end so you can be part of the whole process along the way, ask questions, join along with me, or just come and chit chat. All right, you guys, we are going to continue the Splendid Sampler 2 quilt along. We are on our 46th out of 100 blocks, so we are not even at the halfway point yet, you guys, but we're ticking away at these. So the one we're working on today is called Connection. Here we go. It is foundation paper pieced, and yesterday we started it, so we did all our prep work. We cut out all of our pieces and colored them in. You want to color code them for sure. Once you start moving pieces around, it gets pretty confusing. So we started our A pieces, our A section. So you can see A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. There's 5 parts to this, and we have 1 and 2 on here. It might not look like much now. We just got 2 little flaps sewn onto a piece of paper, but it's just going to develop from here. Every new piece you put on with foundation paper piecing, it carves the shapes that you want to see more and more. It's really fun. I like seeing it just develop. So I'm thinking we will probably get both of these A pieces done tonight. We actually have two identical A pieces for this block. So let's get going on that. So thank you again, guys, for joining me. I'm gonna flip you around. Okay, got the sewing machine, got our pieces. So I am still using that new to me Kenmore sewing machine. This is that 1967 Kenmore sewing machine. I like it. This is my 3rd time sewing on it, and it has this nice flat base, which I really like for paper piecing so far. So, all right, let's check out what we did here again. So we are in the A section. You can tell because there's a letter A on every single piece. The other thing on each piece is a number, and that is the order that you sew in. So we have done our A1 piece. We've color-coded it, so that represents this piece. All these other pieces are white, and that for us represents our white fabric. I'm going to have a white background for this. You can see later, here's our C section. Our C section has white fabric. It has our little this same fabric here that we used in that red, and then it has our 3rd fabric, which is we're going to use like this kind of batik tie-dye piece. So we've already pre-cut a whole pile of those pieces. Ooh, and we got these 2 pieces too. We got 2 B pieces. They kind of sit right in here, and then the A piece will be like that, and there you can start to see our design develop. So here we are here. We're doing each section, each piece twice, because one will be this bottom or this top piece, and one will be this bottom piece. So like here's one of them. The other one is just upside down. So if we make all the pieces upside down, then we have our other section. So these go together when we're completely done. And now you can kind of see, I think, why it's so nice to color in your pieces before you get too far. Because, when you take this piece away, and if you didn't have any of this colored in, all you see is a giant puzzle. And it would be so difficult to remember what piece goes where. So definitely color it in before you get started. And you can do that, right at the beginning where you can put all the pieces together like this, color them in. All right, so let's continue with these A pieces. I actually don't need any other fabric except for white for the rest of this. So I'm going to just scooch this stack just out of my way so I don't I don't let it fly around anywhere. Okay, so we have done the A1 piece, the A2 piece. Next up is A3. So the first thing we're going to do is get our perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance. And how we do that is I'm going to lay this flat, make sure, you know, it's pretty floppy now. Make sure that your fabrics are, you know, that they didn't fold up on each other or anything. Just lay them flat. All right, and I'm going to grab my postcard. So like a political mailer or a postcard or like a manila folder, something that has, you know, a thin, strong edge and it isn't as floppy as a normal piece of paper. You're going to use this to fold your piece against here, and I'll show you that in a sec here. So one thing to look at, I'm going to get you guys a little bit lower here. Okay, so we are working on A3, so we always have to remember what piece we're working on. So we are concerned right now with we're gonna fold on one of these lines, but there's lines everywhere, so it's kind of hard to know what line you're paying attention to. And the line to remember is all you have to do is remember what you're currently working on, and that's A3. And then what divides A3 from everything that came before? All right, well, we have A4 here and A5 here along these lines, so that doesn't matter because those didn't come before. The only thing that came before is this A1 and A2 piece. So the line that we're concerned with is right there. We can totally ignore these other lines. It's just our piece we're working on now and whatever came before. So that's the divider. That is the line we are going to be dealing with for the whole A3 part. So I'm going to actually cover up everything that came before and put my postcard right on that line. So right like that. You should just totally ignore that anything comes after. Forget that there's an A4 and A5. They don't exist. Just cover up what came before along that line, and so you're exposing your piece we're working on, that A3, and you're going to flip that up. So that should reveal our current seam allowance on the fabric. And obviously that's pretty raw looking. It's just, you know, we just cut it pretty randomly. At this point, you can get your ruler and you can measure 1/4 inch from your fold. So right like that, and then you can trim that off. Or if you have your add 1/4 ruler, I love this for paper piecing. Again, it has that little ledge, and that ledge is 1/4 inch. So while this is folded on the postcard, you just bop it on. It just stops. Like I can do that with my eyes closed. And then you can just trim off that piece. And there we go. We have our perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance now. So no matter what crazy blob you start out with, you're always going to end up with perfect seam allowances with paper piecing. It's kind of magic. Okay, I'm going to flip that back. Since we're doing these two pieces at the same time because they're identical, I'm going to do the same thing with this. Cover up all that came before. Flip that piece over. And trim that seam allowance as well. Okay, so there we go. We have our first two pieces all trimmed. And all right, so next up, that's the first part of the process. Next up is we want to get our fabric for this piece. So again, it is white. In our case, it's white because we chose white for all of the background. And since we've color-coded it, the white stayed white. Yesterday, when we cut our A2 piece, I actually cut a whole pile of strips about the thickness, the width that we need. And I did that because just in this, with all of these segments, it looked like there was a lot of pieces, you know, even on the B and C areas. There was a whole lot of pieces in this block that were about the same width, that was white with about the same width. So I just cut a pile of strips, and I'm going to trim them to my needs, basically. So what we are looking for is a piece of fabric that's as big as our A3 piece plus a generous seam allowance. And by generous, I mean more than 1/4 of an inch. So we can see, you know, obviously we got more than 1/4 of an inch on either side. Now we need more than 1/4 of an inch, you know, on this edge and this edge. You know, we could even go at a diagonal here because that piece is at diagonal, but I'm not going to worry about that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your fabric and put it, mine doesn't have a right or wrong side, but pretend that you're putting the right side down. So the part that has the pretty pattern and graphics, put that side down, the good side down. Again, you can't tell really with mine, but you know, so this is like, you know, put this good side down. And then we're going to take that folded edge, and I'm going to align it with an edge that's already pre-cut pretty well from, oops, we're going to do it this way. Make sure that your piece is actually on the fabric. And then if you fold that back, you should have your generous 1/4 inch seam allowance. And if you don't have a nice good edge, just get a ruler, just trim a nice edge. So whenever this edge is what's going to match up to our perfect good seam allowance that we cut here. So we want like those two edges to match up really nice. So all right. So I'm just kind of measuring my piece. All right, that's a generous seam allowance. Now I need like a good generous seam allowance here. I could just cut a blob like this, but you know, I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to cut straight across. Keep it simple. So there. This is definitely a piece that's as big as this A3 piece plus a generous seam allowance. So now what we want to do is we want to match up those edges. So see both sides are face down. We're going to put right sides together. I'm just going to pull them up like that. And then this edge will match with this edge with right sides together, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm just going to lay them flat. We matched up those two good edges there. And we're still on that fold. So I'm going to do a test. Let's see if we placed it in the right spot. So I'm going to pretend I'm sewing right on that line. And flip it around. And I'm going to pretend to press. And why we're doing this is we want to test to make sure that I've placed this piece of fabric in the right position, like not too far this way and not too far that way. And how we can tell is when we flip it back around, does our A3 piece, does this fabric, our A3 piece, do we still have that generous seam allowance on all of our sides? And we definitely do. So this piece of fabric is placed just fine, and we are ready to sew that. So let's do this other piece quickly. So put the right side down. Again, mine doesn't really have a right or a wrong side. This edge is kind of raw, so I'm gonna get my nice straight edge, because that straight edge is what's gonna match up to that good other straight edge that we trimmed, that straight edge. All right, so lay your A3 piece on your fabric and move it till you get that generous 1/4 inch seam allowance around every piece. And again, I'm gonna just kind of cut right there. And I'm always a little bit more generous on this than I need to be, just to make sure I have enough. So now, one thing, you guys may have left your seam allowance on the edge here. So like in our original design here, it had that seam allowance there. I cut that off of mine because you won't always see that in paper piecing patterns. So, but here's where it comes into play. If you have your seam allowance there, that's fine. You'll have just some extra padding. But since I'm always putting a generous 1/4 inch seam allowance on my pieces, I already know that I'm going to have a generous 1/4 inch seam allowance on these edges. So I'm just doing the same thing I'm doing with every other piece. I don't have to do anything different for the outer edge. So that's why I just trim it off, because I don't need the confusion of another element. I'm just treating it like every single piece. So let's put these two edges together, right sides together, and do our little test sew and be done. Oh, congrats, Aaliyah, how exciting. All right, pretend sewing along that line with my pin. Do our little dummy check here. Pretend pressing. And we definitely have a generous seam allowance all the way around. Not worried at all. Let's fold that back, and we're ready to sew. We're gonna sew right on that line, and I'm gonna start where it crosses, or where it's like runs into another shape. You know, it's running into this A5 shape. I'm gonna start right there. I'm gonna go forward and then reverse for a stitch and then go forward again. That kind of locks it in place. And then the same thing at the end. I don't really want to run into the next piece. I did a little bit here. That's not the end of the world, but I just try to go right on that line. All right, so let's sew both of those. We got our two shapes there. All right, to the machine. So I'm still learning this machine, and I still have to oil it a little bit more. I'll probably do that maybe this weekend a little bit. I need to replace the lamp, the light in there. I can take the pin out. If you have a big, long piece that's really floppy, I would leave your pins in or even pin it some more. But in this case, I'm just gonna, I can hold all those pieces there and just move it into place. All right, so I'm gonna go forward and backwards on that line. I forgot how to do the reverse on this machine for a sec there. All right, and then forward. It's only taking a couple of stitches. And then backwards, 1 or 2, and then forward to just kind of lock it in place. So, and that's that. One thing to remember is to make your stitch length a little smaller. A little just smaller, because that makes more, every time you make a stitch, your needle goes into the paper, which is like making perforations. And that's going to make it easier to tear off the paper later. All right, so I'm going to just snip my little ends, snip right up to the paper there, and then same thing on the back. So we don't have all of that long thread around. And that piece is just about done there. We have to press it yet. Let's do this one quickly. Oh, it's going to be fun to put the triangles on next, because that's really gonna, we're gonna really start seeing our shape, that middle shape develop. Every time you put a new piece on, it carves out the real shapes of everything that came before it, and it's always kind of exciting to see that develop. Whew, that makes some funny noises, this machine. Oop, that didn't need to go down. All right, let's snip that. Where do you find foundation paper piecing patterns? Do they come with paper? Not necessarily. So just so you know, I am only using just normal printer paper, like just some like photocopy paper. I'm not doing anything special. There is special paper that's maybe a little thinner to tear it off, but I have never had really any problem with this. Just look, you know, for, if you want to find patterns, I would just Google foundation paper piecing patterns, and there's a pile of designers who make really good patterns, and sometimes they're just digital too. Like you could just print out the digital pattern. What you'll get is a sheet that looks like a lot like this, you know, the segments. And it might even be like how I had the whole piece laid out before, with everything kind of hooking together, all the parts. You might just get that, and then you have to look for the A's and then cut out the piece and hope that you get all the A's in there. You know, you might have to cut it out yourself too. This might not be its own, like it might not be obvious that this is its own section. You'll have to find all the A's and cut out the A's as a segment. All right, so next up is we need to press, but I need to get some stuff out of the way. I always make kind of a big mess when I'm foundation paper piecing. Everything gets in the way here, but all right, let's go over to the pressing mat here and put the printed side down. And I'm just going to finger press this first. See, we're not stitched all the way to the edge here because, you know, we only stitched on that line. So we want to finger press it first like this and then extend the pressing to the parts that don't have any stitching on. So there we go. And once we're done with that, then you can give it a press. Okay, that's all there is to that. All right, let's do the other one. Again, that quick finger press. And there we go. So our A3 piece is done. So look at here. I still have a more than a 1/4 inch here, but look how much is over here on this side, this seam allowance. So that is because I shifted this a little too far this way when I placed this piece. So just imagine if I shifted it a little too far this way and I didn't have that generous seam allowance, I might not have had a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. So that could have really messed me up. At worst, it wouldn't be even big enough to cover our piece. And then we get into a big problem where we have to take the fabric off and re-sew. But in this case, since I cut a big enough piece around, we have plenty on either side. So that worked out well. All right, and you can see we're starting to carve that first piece here. We have the length of it basically sized. Next up, we're going to be starting to carve it from the two sides there. So let's take a look at what's next. Flip it around. Last one we did was A3, so next up, A4. So we're going to do one of these big triangles now, so that'll be kind of fun. Let's get our white fabric again. It is, well actually, let's get our good seam allowances first. That's what I usually do first. So again, we are concerned with the line. I mean, there's only really one line touching this A4 and it extends the entire width there. But it is the A4 piece, the one that we're working on, and whatever happened before. And that's all of this, A1, A2, A3, that all happened before. So we're gonna cover up everything that happened before. So we're on that line of the A4 piece and everything that happened before. Let's flip that. Now there is our current seam allowance. We got a whole pile of different fabrics in there. So that's kind of a fun one. Add a 1/4 ruler on there. Oh, thanks, Tracy. I hope this is helping you guys if you're nervous about paper piecing. You really do get in a rhythm as you get going here. And we'll be working on this for several nights yet. There's a lot of pieces with this, so we'll get in that rhythm too. But there we go, our perfect 1/4 inch. So even though that was all a pile of crazy just there, we still end up with like such a good 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we can fold that back. Let's do our other one here. covering up everything that came before. Oh, Tracy, you'll get it. Are you do mitered on the borders or the binding? I have not done a mitered border ever. My mom did that, I think, on a recent quilt. I'll have to take a look at how she did that. All right, another perfect 1/4 inch. We should do that on one of our future quilts here, do a neat mitered, a mitered corner. That'd be kind of fun. All right, good. Oh, border's not binding. Ooh, Tracy, I've never done that before. Oh, good, Mary. I'm happy that you're getting a little bit more. I mean, I am saying a lot all at once, but once you get going, it makes more sense. And it's a little extra confusing with this particular, with me doing it this time because I'm using this fabric that doesn't have a right or wrong side. When you have fabrics that all have the right and wrong side, it makes a lot more sense. So it's easy to keep track of things a little bit. All right, here is our fabric. So we need a piece of fabric that's going to cover this A4 piece plus that generous seam allowance around it, right? And I need a straight edge that's going to match up with that straight edge that we just cut. So, you know, I got a pretty good straight edge going here already. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to place this piece on that straight edge. I know this is going to be a little goofy. And actually, I think I can cut 2 at once here. Because I got two you know, of these A4 segments. All right, so I need that generous seam allowance all the way around, and ooh, I'm pretty close there. I actually might not have enough, or I'm just cutting it a little closer than I want, because see this point here, I need that generous 1/4 inch seam allowance there, and you know, I do kind of have it, but it's awfully, it's closer than I'd like it to be. I think we're gonna do it anyway, though. That is closer than I usually prefer. But we'll get generous on the rest of it. So I'm gonna just free blob form this. There we go. The rest of this is very much more than the 1/4 inch. So I just need to trim that little fold here. And again, I have to remember, well, in this case, I know, you know, I'm treating, I gotta make sure that I remember what side I'm saying is the wrong side, or the right and the wrong side on this. Ooh, yeah, I'm gonna have to do the test for sure to make sure I have the generous seam allowance here. So let's put those edges together. This is where that test is gonna come in. So I'm gonna do it where I think it should go. So I'm gonna go where I have the generous seam allowance over there and on this side, as best I can tell. And we're gonna do our test. So let's flip that over. And do our pretend sewing. Pretend sewing. So I did something here that I don't think you're going to be able to do if you are using patterned fabric. So I just cut 2 pieces at the same time by folding it. But really by doing that, you're making a mirror image of each other. So it'll probably work with this piece since this is a pretty equilateral type shape here. But for a really odd shape, like this one isn't a perfect triangle, like this side is longer than this side, you would have opposite triangles here, and we need the same triangles. So I probably, if you have pattern fabric, I would not have folded it over. I would have cut these pieces separately or stacked fabric up on top of each other, so all the right sides and the wrong sides were stacked the same. But since I'm just using this white, I think I got away with it. All right, we fake sewed that. Let's fake press it. Okay, and I think we have that generous seam allowance, just barely. So, you know, we got that 1/4 inch here, 1/4 inch here. I don't think we have to move our piece at all. So we're good. So fold that back. This one's ready to sew. I am going to keep, this is pretty floppy. It's kind of a bigger piece. I'm going to leave those pins on. Let's do this one. So just kind of placing the piece here. Remember, the right side is down. And we're kind of matching up this straight edge with this straight edge that we cut. So put the right sides together. There we go. And again, we want to place this. I'm going to kind of do my, you know, I want that generous 1/4 inch seam allowance again. So let's scooch it over here. We'll definitely do our test again. Ugh, I think it's a little easier to do this way. Okay, let's grab 2 more pins. And let's fake sew along our line here. Ooh, wow. That pin did not, oh, this is like a horrible pin. It's not going through the fabric or the paper. Okay, there we are. There we go. Let's do our test pressing. But you can see we're shaping these pieces now. That little orange piece is getting thinner. All right, let's test. All right, we got our generous seam allowance on either side, so we are good. Phew, that was a close one. I don't usually like doing that. I like being more generous, but I was trying to use up that fabric. Usually I don't err on the side of trying to use up fabric with foundation paper piecing. I like doing the big extra blob shapes because then you're safe, usually. And you know, the whole thing with paper piecing is that I don't have to measure, I don't have to think too much once you get going, because there is no real measuring. You can just do your blobs. So when I get too close like that, that's too much work. That's more work than I want to do. All right, so there's a little bit of a difference with this part of the sewing. Since we are going off the edge into the seam allowance here, I'm actually going to start a little bit further back, like in the seam allowance, so like a 1/4 inch or so back from the line I'm going to be sewing on. Just so I'm a little bit more, I got a little bit more sewn edge here. This is going to be our final seam allowance here. All right, and then remove that pin. Now I'm going to go along that A4 line. Oop, I'm a little off of it, but let's get back on. I'm trying to get used to this pedal yet. It's speeding along a little bit faster than I'd like to. Getting used to it. All right, let's move that other pin. And again, on this side, it hits a seam allowance, so I'm going to go into that seam allowance again. And then we'll just back tack there. And I think we're going to just, yeah, I'll take it off the machine. I was going to just start the next piece up right away, but we're going to take it off. Sometimes it's just easiest to stick how you're already doing it. All right, let's trim these guys. All right, everything looks good. Let's peek. Ah, there it's coming along. We're carving that shape. We almost have it there. Almost there. All right. Let's get the second piece. All right, get in that seam allowance again for our starting stitches. Oh, Jackie, we started yesterday actually. So if you haven't seen any of foundation paper piecing yet, I would definitely watch yesterday's video. You can do that on YouTube at Penguin and Fish Movies. The end did get cut off a little bit last night. I don't know why. The recordings have been kind of weird lately. Trying to fix that. But that was just when I was flipping it to talk to you guys at the end. It wasn't, we didn't miss anything. Ooh, gosh, getting used to this machine. All right, a little back tack in there, and ooh, one extra stitch. Okay, skizzers. All right, let's press these guys. Exciting. Cute. All right, to the ironing mat. Last step of the process. Okay. We are going to finger press this again. Oh, wow, I am crooked. Look at how crooked I am. I'm trying to learn. It just kind of scoots away on me still, this machine. So we got some crooked stitching in here, but that's going to be fine. Another reason to do the big blobs. All right, finger press that. And, oops, you guys can't see. There we go. And then press it again. Remember to put the printed side, the side with the, like the A1, all the lines, all that, put that face down so it doesn't get on your iron. And there we go. That piece, you know, it's all blobby, but just remember, we're going to be trimming that down later. And look how clean it's going to look once it's trimmed down. Every part of the process just makes it look cleaner and cleaner with foundation paper piecing. So there we are. Only one more piece and we'll have that perfectly carved little sunburst line. All right, let's do this one. So this part goes down. The part with all your lines and stuff. So finger press that. All right. Oh, Robin, sometimes try and swipe one way or the other. Oops, whoops, I pressed that guy up the wrong way. Let's press that back. Sometimes if you swipe one way or the other, comments will come on. And sometimes people just aren't saying something, so it just might not be showing any new comments. All right, there we are. I put a little fold in there, but we'll be sewing over that pretty much. Okay, that's that. A4 is done. We have one more piece on this A section, and then both of our A sections are done. Yay! That means we're a third of the way through then. That's good, because there's a B section and a C section yet. Oh, and then we got to sew it all together, I suppose, too. Got to sew those sections together. All right, let's get our good seam allowance. Again, we do that by first identifying the line that we're working with. And again, we're working on A5, so it's the line in between A5 and everything that happened before. In this case, it's everything. So this is our new line. Let's cover up everything that happened before along that line. Fold back that A5. If you sewed a little bit too far into your A5 piece earlier, you're just going to have to like tear it back a little bit. That's fine. So it's all flush against your edge here yet. Okay, get my add a quarter ruler. Again, you can just use a normal ruler. Okay. Trim those all up. There we got our perfect seam allowance again. That's just so cool. Like when we tear all this paper away, even though we started with crazy blobs, we're gonna have the best seam allowances ever on this. All right. Oh gosh, this is kind of maybe pulled the fabric kind of funny too. Getting used to the machine still. All right, flip that around. Okay, A5 and everything that happened before. See, so here I stitched a little too far into the A5. I'll have to pull